Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar series. Thank you for finding us today at this new time. I'm going to go through a couple logistics as we're getting settled, but thank you for joining us today. My name is Julia Masterman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Education and Outreach Specialist for CWASI. CWASI is the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science, Incorporated, and we're a nonprofit organization funded in part by the National Science Foundation. Our mission is to empower the water community and advance science through collaboration, infrastructure, and education. We seek to fulfill this mission in a number of ways, including our data services, as well as our education outreach or community services. CWASI's data and compute services provide tools and support for the entire data lifecycle. It's the hope that providing this support and infrastructure, CWASI can help researchers formulate and execute their data management plans, be effective data stewards, and meet the requirements of funding agencies. The other side of our organization are our community services. These include grants, workshops, a summer institute at the National Water Center for graduate students, which will have applications opening later this month, a webinar series and events like this one, a virtual university, and more. This is the last in our series of 5 workshops for this project. Today's workshop will focus on the islands. Thank you so much to all of our conveners for putting together this series. It's been really great so far, and we expect this week to be no different. And thank you to CIROH, who is supporting this project as well. We'll hear some keynote presentations from our speakers, and then we will kind of transition into more Q&A and then open discussion. Depending on how many of you there are, we'll either stay in this room or transfer into a different meeting room link for that second, more open discussion portion. So, but that information will be shared in the chat as we move through this today. A few logistics as we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the CWASI YouTube channel. Secondly, we ask that you use the Q&A functionality to submit questions to our speakers. Feel free to add questions at any time and upvote any that are especially of interest. Finally, we expect that all involved with CWASI events uphold the CWASI Code of Conduct and promote and maintain a professional, considerate, respectful, and collaborative virtual environment. And with that, I will pass it to Walter, I believe, perhaps?
Yeah, I think that is appropriate. Let me share my screen. Figure out how that works. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen here, and I am presenting right now on behalf of Martin Clark, who is the PI on this project. But Martin is in a car right now, so he is actually unable to share his screen. The good thing is that this is just a brief overview of what this project is about, and that means that I can just skip through the slides and tell you what Martin would have likely told you in my set. So there is a need to predict threats to water futures across large geographical domains. And I think we've all seen pictures like this before, right? Floods and droughts and fires and all these sorts of things. But there are there's a big challenge here of predicting these sustainable water futures, and these prediction needs are becoming so big that it's hard for individual modeling groups or agencies or even entire countries to create the prediction systems that are needed to forecast our water futures and be ready for environmental change. And one way forward is a community approach to the whole modeling problem. And this is a next-gen modeling framework is an example of such a community approach. There were initial versions of the National Water Model, version 1, 2, and 3. And these, in their own right, were pushing the limits of the paradigm of environmental prediction in the sense that these are examples, very, very detailed examples of the high resolution or the hyper-resolution modeling approach. However, there were certain limitations to this approach. It is, for example, incredibly hard to estimate the parameters for these kind of models across really large geographical domains. And that means that the predictions for all these 2.7 million river reaches, that's the focus of the CONUS at least, are actually pretty difficult to set up in a paradigm like this. And one of the consequences of this is that these hyper-resolution models actually do not perform so well. There's not sufficient information and computing resources to actually parameterize these problems. And these modeling approaches are not sufficiently agile in the sense that because it's so difficult to estimate these parameter values, a lot of critical parameters are actually set to hard-coded values in the model source code. And what that means is that these models may have the capability to predict a large variety of processes, but because of these constraints imposed by hard-coded parameters, that potential is very often not realized. So the next-gen paradigm that NOAA is pursuing currently is an alternative approach to this, in the sense that it provides a framework in which it is possible to run different models for different locations, with the conceptual idea that this allows the use of models that are very suitable to the specific basin they're applied to. So instead of having one model that needs to be calibrated and parameterized everywhere, you could have dedicated models that represent the local processes more accurately, are possibly more parsimonious because you can simplify away those processes that are not critical in that specific location. And this would open up a lot of computational resources for parameter estimation, sensitivity analysis, ensemble modeling, and all that kind of stuff. One of the problems, of course, is that you're then left with a question, which model should you use where? And if you want to go the theoretical approach here, you would think that to choose which models are useful in different places, you would first need to understand how the hydrology, how the processes in these different places function. And this is, of course, a big challenge because hydrology varies considerably across the continent. And this is a result of a huge variety in the drivers, such as climate, the vegetation, so what happens on the surface, the soil, the geology, the topography, and all the things that people superimpose upon those things in terms of water management, returns, abstractions, and all these kind of things. So the key problem is if NextGen is to realistically predict local hydrologic states and fluxes, then we need to know what processes matters, where they matter, when they matter, and how they function. And that's where this this particular series of workshops comes in, where we try to get together process hydrologists from a large variety of regions and specifically extend that beyond the CONUS as well. We've had a workshop focus on Alaska and northern Canada, so the more northern regions. We have this island workshop now. And this is all happening under the overall umbrella of CIROH, which is the Cooperative Institute for Research to Operations in Hydrology, with the main goal to define hydrologic processes for a continental mosaic of landscapes. And the first steps involve producing a continental map of hydrologic landscapes, where we specifically look at these drivers of hydrologic behavior, superimpose them, and see if we can define regions where we can reasonably say that hydrologic behavior is relatively similar. And from there, we can develop perceptual models, so a more descriptive understanding of how hydrology works in these regions, and then conceptual models, which is a more mechanistic understanding of how a model for such a region could look, and use that to have a more theory-based approach to selecting models across such an enormous landscape as the North American continent. So that's exactly what that says here. So here's the project team. Hilary McMillan, Ying Fang, Katie van Werkhoven, myself, Jordan Reed, Julia Masterman, and Irene Garusi-Nejat. And Martin has been very modest and not put himself on here, but clearly he should be on here as well. And let's see what we've got here. It's really fun playing slide roulette. The traditional tactics used in hydrology, such as detailed analysis and modeling of individual catchments, makes it difficult to generalize results to large domains and other regimes. Yeah, so this is the big challenge we're trying to address here. Obviously, the continent is very large. There is a lot of local variability going on. And our mission with this particular project is to try and somehow impose some structure on that. And we realize that this is going to be hard, and there will be local idiosyncrasies that will be very difficult to include in an overall high-level approach. But I think the results that we found so far in the previous workshops really indicate that it is actually possible to sort of generalize hydrologic behavior to regions that are internally more or less consistent and quite different from other regions. So now that we're at the end of this workshop series, I think we're all quite optimistic actually about our ability to say something helpful here. With the understanding that, of course, we're not going to have the full answer, but right now we have almost nothing. So anything we can do here is already a good step forward. And I think that was it. So thank you very much. Back to Julia.
And with that, I think we can get to our speakers. Tom, I believe you are up first. Ying, would you like to introduce our first speaker?
I wasn't prepared to do so, to be honest, because we had thought Martin was going to do this. I came all just ears and listen and pay attention. Oh, here is Martin. Okay, Martin, you're arriving just in time to introduce Tom. Hello, Martin. I was wondering if we should just go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry about that. The internet went out and I had to drive to a new location. So it's my pleasure to introduce Tom Jambaluka. Tom is a force of nature. He's been working on hydrological processes in Hawaii for, gosh, I think, the last 4 decades. He was one of the first person to develop a rainfall atlas for Hawaii. I think he did that in the 1980s. And he's been working on climate mapping over the Hawaiian Islands for the past several years. He's installed climate stations, the Hawaii Mesonet, across the high islands of Hawaii, collecting data that none of us had ever really dreamed of. He's got a wonderful network on the summit of Haleakala, wonderful networks throughout the other stations. He's also been doing a lot of research on eco-hydrology, on fog interception, and it's a wealth of experience that he brings. And, we're really excited to have Tom here and hear from him for perceptual models of hydrological processes in Hawaii. So Tom, thanks very much.
Thank you, Martin. Let me get to my slides and let me know if you can see that. We good? Okay. First, I do want to thank Kwasi and the conveners of this series for organizing it and for inviting me to participate. And it's really an honor to be part of this. I'll be talking about some of the dominant hydrological processes that affect tropical islands, with Hawaii as the example. And I'll focus on processes that are processes and conditions and characteristics that pose challenges to hydrological prediction. In this illustration on this color slide, you see a simple diagram showing really a major feature of the weather and the hydrology of the islands. With our high islands, the highest peaks penetrate above the trade wind inversion, and that produces a situation that you see right here, where we have a persistent orographic cloud on the windward side of the islands, which would be on the east side, that is defined by the lifting condensation level at the bottom and is limited at the top by the trade wind inversion. So it defines this very distinct fog zone. And gives us this this pattern of strong gradients in precipitation and other variables that affect the hydrology. So that's just a little bit of background. Let me see if I can move on. Okay, so before I really get started on what are the dominant processes, I think I have to give this statement that really the dominant processes in Hawaii span almost the full range of those that you'd find anywhere else in the country, anywhere in North America, because we have these extreme spatial gradients of climate, topography, geology, soils, land cover, and land use that really give us a continental scale problem when it comes to predicting and characterizing hydrological processes. So what I'm going to do is just give a little bit of background. This is quite abbreviated, of course, with given the time constraints. And then I'll talk about 3 of the dominant processes that really set the islands apart, I think, from most other environments and pose big challenges to hydrological prediction. And that would be, first of all, submarine groundwater discharge, the role of invasive plants in the hydrological cycle in tropical islands, and cloud water interceptions, particularly important for high islands that have that persistent cloud zone, that fog zone. Okay, so let me get started. When I talk about continental scale climate diversity, I'm serious. We have, for example, mean annual precipitation ranging from around 200 millimeters a year to over 10,000 millimeters a year. And these are over very short distances. So these are really extreme spatial gradients. And you can see the comparison on the bar graph at the bottom there, comparing it to the entire mainland US. We have almost as dry a location as the driest place in the US, but we have much, much wetter location. This is in inches, shown in inches, so up to 400 inches a year in mean annual precipitation. And this is true of pretty much any other variable that you can name, that the range is similar to or greater than what you would find in the continental US. And one of those is solar radiation. And you can see that you might not be surprised that we have places that are brighter than anywhere else in the continental US or in North America. But you might be surprised to learn that we also have places that are darker. So we have a wide range of solar radiation, and that, of course, drives a wide range in energy balance conditions throughout the islands. Along with that, we have a pretty wide range of substrate age, geological age, certainly not to the extent of North America, but a large range going from about 0, basically, because we have active volcanoes on the southeastern island of Hawaii, the Big Island, to almost 5 million years on the oldest of the inhabited major islands, Kauai in the northwest. And that gives us a range of weathering, extents of weathering and soil development, and a range of dissection of the topography, so that for the Big Island, we have areas that have no erosion, no soil, no weathering, no erosion, and no well-defined drainage patterns, and basically no surface water flow at all. And then as you go to the northwest, of course, that becomes more and more dissected, more and more well-developed soils and deeper weathering of the landscape. Along with that, we have quite diverse land cover and land use that is driven not only by the climate variability, but also by human use with agriculture, urban development, tourism, and so forth. This is the island of Kauai, the one that's in the northwest. We have a very diverse patterns of a soil type, and soil, hydrologic properties. See most of the major soil orders represented here on a single island. And this diagram, really, I could take the whole time just discussing this. This is a really well done diagram by Alex Tullier from our Water Resource Research Center at the University of Hawaii. And it kind of shows this diversity going from wet windward to dry leeward, from some wet windward on the right to dry leeward on the left, and depicts some of the processes. We have, of course, flooding is an issue across the entire span from windward to leeward. But, wildfire is a big hazard for Hawaii. I think most people know as a result of last year's fires on Maui. So we have a bigger wildfire hazard in the dry leeward areas. We have these processes like the cloud zone, where we have cloud water interception, and we have and then we have human influences, mostly down the lower elevations, and that means that we have, of course, multitude of different point and non-point sources of water pollution. And then the lower part of the diagram is really important because it depicts the simplified picture of the hydrogeology, the groundwater hydrology of the islands, with recharge mainly occurring in the interior of the islands, and then the water in the saturated zone is flowing outward towards the coast and emerging near the shore, or for the most part, actually offshore as submarine groundwater discharge. And as I'll show in a moment, this presents a lot of challenges to the hydrological community in really understanding and quantifying the processes. I might also mention that the climate diversity that's shown here and was shown in the previous maps, really puts the onus on us to have a dense monitoring network. And that's something that we're trying to do. Martin mentioned we're building the Hawaii Mesonet, which is a 100-station network measuring 21 variables at each station. So I'm going to talk about 3 of these dominant processes that present problems and challenges to us. One is submarine groundwater discharge. And as I mentioned, it's just the emergence of a large proportion of the input water as submarine in submarine springs. And so this is the main groundwater body, this Geibin-Hirschberg lens. We also have dike confined water that provides saturated zones up to higher elevations. But by far the largest and most extensive groundwater body is this basal freshwater lens that floats on intruding seawater. And that water flows out and emerges near or past the coastline in form of submarine groundwater discharge, which is essentially unmeasurable. And the reason this is a challenge is that most watershed hydrology that's ever been done has been done in watersheds where you can close the water balance, where you have a stream gauge at a point that's not going to allow much leakage below the gauge, and so you can close the water balance and optimize the model to give you good predictions. We have an extra unknown, of course, because of this unknown fraction of water that is leaking. It's a unknown but large fraction of water that emerges in that is essentially unmeasurable. Now that picture that I just showed was kind of a simplified version of reality, as we always have. But recent research with electromagnetic surveys has shown that this picture could be much more complicated than we thought, with these interleaved layers of seawater and freshwater aquifers, both onshore and offshore, and that there's certainly strong evidence. This is for the west coast of the Big Island, the island of Hawaii, which they found with their surveys that there are these several layers where you have freshwater below seawater, and then another seawater layer, and then another freshwater layer. And so we have large amounts potentially of freshwater stored offshore and emerging offshore, perhaps well offshore. So this really complicates the problem even more than we previously thought. So with the time constraints, I'm going to move on to another issue that's quite a different issue, and that is of invasive species. Invasive plants and animals are a really big environmental problem in Hawaii and other Pacific islands. And I'm going to focus, though, on invasive trees and their impacts on evapotranspiration. I should mention off the bat that we have other problems associated, hydrological problems associated with invasive trees. And I think Yimfan might be mentioning one of those, which is that there's a particular tree that produces large amounts of coarse woody debris during storms and has a big impact on flooding and flood impacts in the lower parts of our watersheds. So I'm going to talk about this very extensive invasive tree, strawberry guava, Psidium cattleyonum, that is found throughout Hawaii and in the wet areas, and also in other Pacific islands, other tropical islands around the world. It originates in South America. and it's displacing native forest in big areas. So this map shows, the red area shows places that have been already invaded. Actually, this map is a fair amount number of years old, so it's beyond this now. But the red areas were already invaded. Yellow is the areas that have potential to be invaded, and green are the areas that are thought to be safe from future invasion by this particular tree. So why is this important? It's long been suspected that this very fast-growing tree also uses water at higher rates than the native trees. And we were able to make measurements of that some years back using eddy covariance at 2 sites, an invaded forest site, invaded with this strawberry guava invasive tree, and a native forest site. So the upper line with the squares are monthly values of evapotranspiration, normalized by net radiation. So it's actually latent energy flux normalized by net radiation. And then it's plotted as a function of soil moisture. And you can see across the soil moisture range that there's a significantly higher rates of evapotranspiration at the invaded site. And this is thought to be due to higher rates of transpiration. If you put that on a map, you can see that it has an impact on the spatial patterns of evapotranspiration. So this is analysis of evapotranspiration for the island of Hawaii. And this area that's in the box and then shown on the right there, this shows this big evapotranspiration anomaly that's caused by this invasive tree. And so if you don't account for that, it's going to present problems. And I should mention that we have evidence of this higher rates of evapotranspiration, but we really don't know it well. We don't know how that the differential between native and invasive trees differs across the climate spectrum in the islands. So this is an estimate of that, but it is with high uncertainty. Lastly, I'm going to talk about cloudwater interception. It's the capture of fog by vegetation in that cloud zone. We have persistent clouds in these areas and very persistent and strong trade winds that blow these droplets through the vegetation. Those droplets impact on leaves and stems. And I want to thank Han Sang for providing this really nice animated diagram for us. This is work that she did. This comes out of work that she did for her PhD dissertation here in Hawaii on cloudwater interception. So this extra water that's added to the system means the canopy is wet more frequently. It lowers the transpiration rate because of the very moist air and wetted canopy, but it increases the amount of water captured. So we have reduced transpiration. We have this additional water added that runs down the stems and drips off the leaves and stems and increases the net precipitation, adding to soil moisture and increasing the water that infiltrates to recharge streams and groundwater. But this is a very difficult flux of water to measure, and it's highly variable in space and time. And so it presents a big challenge when we're doing hydrological modeling. So that occurs in this zone, bounded by the trade wind inversion at the top and lifting condensation level at the bottom, and produces a unique ecosystem, tropical montane cloud forest, and adds water to that area and everything downstream of it. So I'm just going to summarize real quickly here, just the main points that I made, that we have this extreme spatial diversity, which really emphasizes the need for the hyper resolution modeling more so than probably anywhere else. We have this problem of submarine groundwater discharge. It makes hydrological prediction very difficult because we cannot tune our models as well. We have invasive trees that increase the ET and complicates the water balance, but it's difficult to know how much it's increased. We have to know, what is the density of the invading trees in the forest everywhere, and then what is the exact additional ET that you get in different climate environments. And lastly, the cloudwater interception, we have this additional water, which I should mention, we have measured at as much as 1 meter a year of additional water added by cloudwater interception. So it's not trivial, but it is very difficult to measure, and knowing the spatial and temporal variability or patterns of cloudwater interception is still a challenge for us. And that's all I have. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Tom. Great visuals. So for the audience, please put some questions if you have any for Tom into the Q&A. And I'm going to start with some more initial questions from the panel. The first is from Martin. How much have invasive trees changed over time? Have we seen rapid invasion over the past 10 years, or has it been more gradual over decades?
I would say both. It has been gradual over decades, but it does continue despite the heroic efforts of many people who work in conservation here in Hawaii to stem the spread of invasive plants and animals in the islands. But it is a daunting challenge, and we have new introductions all the time. We pretty much have every tropical and subtropical pest plant that exists in the world we have in Hawaii. And unlike places like New Zealand, we don't have international borders at the coastlines or outside the coastlines, so we cannot control the importing of new species into the islands as well as we could if we were like a sovereign entity. And so it is a big challenge, and it has continued apace, and we have new introductions all the time, as I said, and it is a big challenge. We do have these organizations called invasive species councils on each island. They are basically nonprofit organizations that work on grant funding to try to control these invasive species for a lot of reasons, not necessarily just because of hydrologic impacts. But I should mention that the hydrologic impacts are often cited as justification for spending money to control invasive species, although there really is scant scientific research to back up some of the kind of conventional wisdom about the effects of invasive plants on our hydrologic processes.
Thank you. Next question is from Ying. How does fog interception compare to precipitation? Which I guess is about 10%.
Well, it varies a lot. That's a great question. I wish we could give you a good answer on that. But we did measure, so measuring cloud water interception, it takes a lot of effort, takes a long time, takes several years, and we do it by canopy water balance. So we set up through fall and stem flow measurements under the canopy. We estimate the wet canopy evaporation, and we measure precipitation above the canopy, and we just do the mass balance of the canopy water storage to estimate how much additional water there is. So, for example, most places without fog, you would measure the under canopy precipitation. Net precipitation would be less than the precipitation above the canopy because of evaporation. But in the cloud forest, it can be equal or even greater. So we're getting additional water coming in. So I can give you some examples. Two places that we measured with about 100 inches or 2,500 millimeters of annual precipitation got about an additional meter of cloud water interception. So 40% added on top of the precip. In the drier areas, we do get cloud water interception dryers, which is much, much lower, but as a fraction of the precip, it actually could be even higher. And so it may have very little hydrological significance, but it certainly has ecological significance, adding water to those ecosystems that it wouldn't have otherwise. So some of the complications and interesting kind of potential research is, what difference does vegetation change make to the cloud water interception? For example, do these invasive trees do as good a job at harvesting water out of the air as the native trees? And I didn't have enough time to show slides of the difference, but the structural differences in the native forest versus these invasive trees is profound. And we do think, and we do have some evidence that they capture less cloud water than the native forest. And then we also have a lot of land in the cloud zone that has been converted to pasture starting more than a century ago. And some of those areas now are being considered for and already are active in reforestation. And the question is, what will be the net effect of that reforestation? Because certainly the trees will capture more cloud water than the grass, but they'll also use more water. And so what's the net effect of reforesting these pasture areas in the cloud zone? It's a big question.
Thank you for that. We have several more questions. The next is, oops, yeah. From Martin, you say submarine groundwater discharge is large and uncertain. What numbers could you put on it? Lower and upper value?
Yeah, it's certainly, this is not an area that I'm an expert in, but from what I've seen, I think it's probably in the range of 25 to 40% of the input water at the top, of the precip coming in. So maybe 25% is running off in streams, and maybe 40 or 50% is evaporating and transpiring, and the rest is leaking. So we can kind of get it by difference in watersheds where we have good stream flow measurements and good weather measurements, but we can't, it's an unknown. So it makes the whole process a little looser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have several more questions, but we need to move on for now. So we will we'll pose these questions to you and give you a chance to answer them either in writing or maybe when we get into the discussion later after the presentations. So with that, I think I'm passing it back to, is it Martin, to introduce Yin Fan?
Yep.
Sounds like you're in a disco.
Is this any better?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Yeah, okay. So one of the things that I didn't realize when I first met Yin Fan is that she actually has the same name as Ying Fan. It's just like slightly different origin. So I found that interesting. Ying Fan is fantastic scholar. She's been working in a number of different areas, climate variability and change impact on stream fauna and ecosystems, extreme flow events, stream ecology and aquatic landscape ecology, hydrological modeling, drought and drought risks. And she's been doing some wonderful work in Hawaii, doing some wonderful evaluations of the National Water Model, simulations of hydrological processes in Hawaii. And I'm very, very excited to see what Ying will be able to share with us today. So Ying, welcome. It's wonderful to have you.
Well, thank you, Martin, for the introduction. Let me get my slides up. I hope that will work. Everybody see the slide? Cool. All right, well, thank you again for the introduction. And then for the time's sake, I'm gonna move on to talk about, given this opportunity to talk about the perceptual model for Hawaii. And I would like to first orientate everybody where I'm talking about. So the island system I'm presenting today is Hawaii, is the island trend in the middle of Pacific, right? It's so remote that the closest landmass is California, United States, is 3,800 kilometers away and is 6,500 kilometers away from Japan. And I also want to acknowledge that even though I'm presenting my understanding of Hawaii Island in terms of their perceptual model, but I want to acknowledge that there are other Pacific islands, for example, those US API islands, that they likely have other unique process that might not be represented in Hawaii Island system. Okay, so here is a satellite image that's showing the largest 8 islands of Hawaii, and with the fluorescent blue line showing where the streams are. So from west to the east, these islands from the oldest to the newest. So we have Niihau, Kauai, Oahu, Molokai, Lanai, Maui, Kaho'olawe, and the last one is the Big Island. So Big Island is our youngest island with active volcano and still growing. The Kilauea volcano is erupting every now and then, and with a live cam that you can watch. So it's really fascinating. Okay, so here, given this unique location and volcanic geology, so Hawaii Islands system typically have very small drainage area with steep slope. There are a total of 376 perennial streams, and majority of the streams are first order stream, almost 59% of the stream, and 36% of them are second or third order streams, and only 4% that is fourth order stream. The Waimea River, can you see my cursor here? I'm not sure. So the Waimea River on the south of Kauai is the only fifth order stream in Hawaii. So that gives you some perspective about our stream distribution and how they align each other. So first of all, you can imagine that Hawaii stream is really short, right? So the longest stream in Hawaii is on Hawaii Island, the Big Island, is the Wailuku River. The total length is 32 miles. So compared to Mississippi River, it's like 2,340 miles. And you probably will say that Mississippi River is too big. Why you compare with it? So if you take a look, like a tributary of Colorado River, the East Eagle River on Colorado. So the stream length is 60.5 miles with the drainage area of 945 square miles. So even the biggest basin in Hawaii is still a small portion compared to the tributary of the Colorado Basin. And then not to forget something is that in this island system, this short distance of the stream length means that they are in very close proximity to the coast. So we are talking about a stream running from the mountain all the way to the ocean, so short and so quickly. And the next thing I want to give you a sense about the elevation profile of the stream or our watershed. So on the right here is our Alawai stream or Manoa stream, just above the Waikiki beach. The elevation gain is from the sea level and all the way to 938 meters. But you can take a look here, like at the beginning of the coast, the slope is increasing very gently, but then suddenly it increased dramatically, on the upland. So in the very last 3 kilometers of the distance, it climbed up about 800 meters. So basically every 100 meters, the elevation increased about 20 meters and the maximum slope is 67. But if you look at the Eagle River, again, I just randomly pick a watershed that I happen to interested in, and showing that the slope increase is gradual and then is about 100 meter increase 2.2 meters. And the maximum slope is 27.4. So here just to show that how steep and rapidly increase of the the watershed it could be. And I actually want to take the opportunity to show you the watershed. Can you see the browser screen? Good. Okay, cool. So here is the Manoa stream that I was showing you earlier. And I want to take this opportunity actually show you where the 3D view to give you a sense about how the watershed orientated. So you can see that this is the watershed, and here is our Ko'olau Mountain Ridge, and then everything is within very short distance. And in the back of it, the conservation area is covered by forest, but again, very steep. And then near the coast are those areas with urbanized residential area, again, near the coast, and it's very flat. So hopefully that gives you some sense about how this look like. And I'm gonna go back to this one. I hope this is showing. Slideshow. Is it showing? Swap it. Okay, is this showing the slide? Good, okay, cool. All right, so other than elevation profile, dramatic change, I want to also mention about the narrowness of the watersheds. So if you look at the Eagle River, the width and the length ratio is about 0.8, but then for Alawai watershed is about 0.37. What this is really translated to is, if you remember the topographic index that was used by the top model, is index describing the contributing area upstream and to the respective slope. So Hawaii watershed is basically in the lowland is a very, is at the bottom of this figures, have really high topographic index. And then the top of the watershed is basically a very small topographic index. So hopefully that makes sense. And then last but not the least is that Hawaii stream is really flashy. So the rising is taking about an hour, and then the receding is take about a few hours. And then the time to the peak, according to the watershed in Oahu, is about 0.55 to 2.85 hours. And here I'm showing another example using Manoa Stream. So here is a storm in August, and showing that the peak, the timing to the peak is taking about 30 to 45 minutes. And then it takes about 3 hours to recede. And then if you look at the peak travel time, here I'm using the color coded. So you can see that the grayish color or the greenish color is at the near the river mouth, and then the red one is in the back of the mountain. So from the back of the mountain all the way traveling to the river mouth, it takes about 30 minutes. That's it. The peak just run through in 30 minutes. Okay, and then I also want to add and emphasize that on top of all the natural characteristics, human make a difference too, right? So here is that the waterway has been really complex for this watershed. The land use likely have changed from natural landscape to urbanized and residential, even agricultural area. And the imperviousness have increased near the coast, right? So all this have playing a role in terms of how the hydrological response. So what does that really telling us? And how does this translate to our stream flow generation? What is it exactly like? So I want to start from the base flow supply to describing, and I believe that Tom actually gave a really good example describing our diverse volcanic geology. So if you know that first of all, we have this amazing dike system, basically is a parallel impervious wall, and then holding this compartment, that this compartment can hold the water even within. And then in the bottom of it, in the lower part of the island, that we have this basalt aquifer is forming this freshwater lens. So if a stream is cutting through our groundwater aquifer, then it will become perennial stream, continues to have groundwater supply, right? But then if our stream is running above the aquifer, then our stream will be ephemeral or intermittent streams. So how about the runoff generation? So there are a few different factors that contributing to the runoff generation. So here I list a few of the soil series that I found from the USDA. So you can see that on top of the topsoil, we have this loamy or clay topsoil. And what that translated is that sometimes the infiltration actually decrease with more moist condition with these type of soil. And another thing to mention is that the number here is showing that the distance or the depth to the bedrock. And that's what I can find. I believe they can be deeper, but basically from what the soil series is showing here, the distance to the bedrock is basically 1 to 1.5 meters. It's really not that big to contain water in our soil column. And what's even more is that we have several weather systems can brought in very intense rainfall. So at the bottom of this figure is showing a rain gauge in Kahana rain gauge. And we can have up to 90 millimeter per hour of rainfall coming down. So all that together translated to our rainfall generation process. It could be because we have this loamy, clayey topsoil and intense rainfall, we have this infiltration access flow happening. But also because we have small soil column containing the water, maybe we do have saturation access flow, the Donian flow. And then because our topography, we have this really steep upland and very flat lowland. So all of it translated to, here is a hydrograph that my postdoc Yufeng Huang actually run the model and generated. So here is a Waikana stream, and then the blue line is showing the observation by the USGS gauges. And you can see that the shape is really sharp, and then rising and falls really quick. And what happened is that if we run the model and simulated turning off the infiltration process during the storm part, which is the green line that is showing here, we can almost exactly matching the magnitude of the peak. So what this is telling us is that, oh, our watershed response likely almost like a hydrophobic response, right? It's very quick and almost have no infiltration. Okay. Last couple point I want to show is that, my lab actually have investigated the rain gauge and stream gauge throughout the state. And what we definitely have found is that the biggest rainfall is not equal to the biggest flood. And we also found that if we have the rainfall and the antecedent in situ soil moisture data, we will be able to better predict the high storm flow. So antecedent soil moisture condition is really critical to help us generating or understanding the high flow generation. And one last point is this, the rainfall spatial variation. So here is a picture. You are actually standing on top of the ridge. On the right-hand side is Manoa watershed. On the left-hand side is Palolo watershed. And you can see that Manoa is raining while Palolo is not. So by a little bit shifting of the rainfall, you will likely have different stream flow response in each of the watersheds. So this is very tricky. And then last but not the least, so we definitely have very extreme rainfall and we have raging stream and very devastating flood damage. So Hawaii is actually the record holder, a national record holder for a rainfall in Kauai, receiving 49.7 inches within 24 hours and then damaged 532 houses and caused damage of 19.7 losses. So the community in the North Shore Kauai is still trying to recover from this damage. And as you can see, this picture here is the house is being destroyed. But one point to mention from our learning and talking with the community is that the invasive species, which is our albizia tree, which is really brittle, and likely during the storm, they broke and fall into the stream, blocking the waterway or blocking the bridge and make the flood worse. So I think that's the point that Tom want to also make sure that we mention it here. So lastly, so the summary, Hawaii stream is really unique in terms of they are short, steep, and very flashy. They have this loomy or clayey top soil, and then so make the infiltration process kind of slow. And then we have very small soil column to contain the water. And the complexity is being added by the human alteration. The stream flow generation process, again, you need to know where you are relatively at compared to the aquifer area. And because of our natural characteristic and the human alteration, our response time is really short, almost like a hydrophobic response. So knowing the antecedent soil moisture condition is really important, and understanding the high spatial variation of the rainfall is also really important. And the extreme climate in our island system is real and is happening. So I just want to leave a stat. So studying hydrology in island system has been really awesome, and I have great company. So I want to thanks everyone here in my lab and have the opportunity to present here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yin-Fan. That was awesome. Thank you for that presentation. We have a bunch of questions piling up for you. The first is from Hillary. She says, great talk. Given that you find the watershed acts almost like an impervious surface, why do you think antecedent soil moisture is so critical?
That's really interesting. I do feel like the evapotranspiration, like Tom was presenting, still playing a critical role in this process. And specifically, if I didn't emphasize enough, so even though we have this topsoil situation, the infiltration rate actually different when it's dry versus wet. Right. So if we do know that how wet it is, it will help us understand the changes. I think I lost train of thought. There's another point about the soil moisture that I want to make. I forgot already. Oh, yes. So the rainfall. So we actually try to do the rainfall accumulation, like antecedent rainfall accumulation, how much that is before the storm process. But it turns out the rainfall is not a good surrogate in itself to represent the antecedent condition. it really, in my opinion, it really still need the soil moisture in situ understanding to help us better predicting the flood. I hope that addressed your question.
Yeah, thank you. And next from Wouter, both presentations mentioned a dike system that traps fresh water. The figure in this presentation suggests these systems extend deep underground. Is this a natural feature or human infrastructure? In either case, how was it created and what's the spatial extent?
I gonna try and then Tom can help me here. It's a natural geology system that it was a dike, basically when the volcano trying to erupt and then it would cool down and then become the vertical wall, if that makes sense. Tom, is that right? And then that has been happening 100 million years ago. It's natural.
Yeah, you got the main points. I think I would just add that most of the rock of the islands is erupted in sort of gentle lava flows that produce layered basalt that is highly porous. It has a lot of gas vesicles and cracks, but subsequent eruptions that occur in the main vent areas of the volcanoes erupt through that layered system and create cracks, that open up and become filled with magma. And after the eruption stops, that magma slowly cools in those cracks, and therefore it ends up a much denser and less porous kind of structure or formation, and forms these walls that we call volcanic dikes. And they form compartments. They intersect with each other. And as Van said, sometimes they're parallel to each other, and they impound water so that we have saturated zones up to very high elevations, but they're limited spatially. They're they look bigger, I think, spatially than they are in those diagrams, but they're certainly important in those central vent areas of each volcano.
Thank you. Have time for maybe one or two more questions. From Ying, lower K in wetter soil, is that because of the swelling clay that reduces pore size, or is it because the soil is saturated, or both?
I want to say the first. I feel it's definitely swelling from my own hiking experience. That's how I feel. When I hike, we can see the topsoil clay really red, and then the rain coming down and it start run off already. I don't believe that it was so wet before I hike, but then it start running off.
Kate, I believe you were muted if you're reading the question. Sorry.
Sorry, my dog's barking and I was trying to mute in between. Sorry, everybody. Last question from Wouter. Can it be said that all islands have comparatively similar hydrologic behavior, or are there certain differences between the islands that should be taken into account?
That's a great question. And I'm gonna go back to Tom's presentation. So we actually have quite a diverse, even though I try to simplify or summarize into that, but remember we have this diverse climate gradient and diverse geology ages. So a lot of time we want to say that the older island might have a system more similar to the continental system, and then the young island have very either impervious or very permeable rock, and then the water just run through. So I want to be cautious in saying that when you're trying to describing the island system, is not one bucket fits all. It's really diverse.
Awesome, thank you. And I think that wraps up our questions. Julia, we're going to switch links, is that right?
Yeah. Thank you to our speakers so much for taking the time to present today. So we are going to transition to our synthesis discussion, which means we're going to switch links. That link is in the chat. We hope that you all come join us, and in that new room, we'll be able to see you and hear you, attendees, and have a conversation more in depth about the perceptual models that exist in this region and what they might be missing so we can continue to move forward in this for this project. So the link to join is in the chat. It'll ask you a couple questions to fill out, but you can stay on that page and there'll be a link, you can click to join straight from that page. And we hope to see you there. So we're gonna give about a 10-minute break while folks make the jump. So meet us in that room at 3:10. But don't walk away from your computer just yet. Make sure you've clicked that link and saved that link right now, because this room is going to be closed and then the new one will be open. So see you there at 3:10.
Is that the link at the bottom of the chat right now?
Yes.
Is that the one? Okay.
That is the link to register. So if you have already registered, then you probably have received an email from Julia earlier.
Yep, there'll be a Zoom automated email if you've already registered for that afternoon synthesis meeting.
Thank you so much, Tom and Yinfan. Those are just really eye-opening. You guys are spot on, giving us the big picture, the most important processes, and just, it's fantastic. Thank you. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
you.
See you later.